Welcome back, everybody. We are going into Chapter 10, Sexuality and Marriage, Part 2. And we're picking up in the section where it says sex is a calling to connect. I want to start just by saying that it's something we often I will often bring up to couples. Not every couple, but here and there, if it's appropriate, I will mention something to the effect of, how many times we've had sexual intimacy over the years, almost 40 years of being married, averaging twice a week. I would figure maybe 4,000 times of physical intimacy. That's exciting to a guy, right? And the important thing is to keep going, right, and be consistent with it. But there's something that I like to think about. It's kind of like has to do with the average of those times as to like how they are with consistency and also with satisfaction and just kind of contentment. And the point that I make is that it's not about like hitting a home run every time or having an expectation that it's going to be a 10 like it is in the movies where it's scripted and acted out. So it's important to be realistic in our expectations of sexuality. And again, if you're not married yet and you're like excited and can't wait, that's healthy and normal and good. So we're not saying that it's, you shouldn't be expected. But just for setting yourself for the long haul, and if you're already married watching this, you understand this probably by now. Setting yourself for the long haul, it's important to have a good, healthy expectation in that area. Another thing that I want to cover briefly is that I can recall times here and there along the way where, I was just thinking about sexual intimacy. And of course, as we mentioned in a different session, guys have their boxes. So when a guy's in his sexual intimacy box or compartment, that's all he's thinking about. And sometimes we would be in the bedroom and be about to, engage physically and stuff, and a conversation would start. And not an argument, but just a conversation or a discussion. And I would be getting like irritated inside thinking, that's not what we're here for. We're here to, just get it on physically, right? But actually, because all the areas of intimacy, which Anne will address in a moment, are all connected, sometimes it's good and ideal to have a conversation, occasionally, not every time, right? But occasionally having a conversation to connect, because it's all about connecting, and that's very, very important. So percentage-wise, sexual intimacy, again, it's very important in a marriage, but probably it's like 2 to 4% of your whole married life is going to be the area of romance and intimacy.
Mm-hmm. And wives desire intimacy in 3 other areas as well. A woman wants to feel a connection with her husband, and just the sexual area will not totally make her feel connected. She needs connection spiritually, emotionally, and intellectually as well. When you think about it, especially if you're still in your engagement period, how did you get to know one another? Those 3 areas were the areas that you experienced getting to know one another. And so they're very important for developing a relationship, and they're very important for maintaining a relationship. But of course, the sexual intimacy part of a marriage, even though it's small, as Mike has said, time-wise, it is very important. And so we want to be sure that we have all 4 areas going in our marriage. Now, it may sound funny to you, but there's something that we do, and psychologists actually recommend it, and that is scheduling our times of intimacy. We didn't always do that, but we have done it for years, and it really, really helps to be sure, because that part of your marriage is so important. You don't want to leave it to chance or to mood. So Amen. Let's be sure that we do that. Now, what about spontaneity? Well, spontaneity is wonderful. But in our busy lives, spontaneity doesn't always happen. And so we want to be very careful to be sure that we're scheduling or making sure that it's happening one way or another. For us, scheduling works really, really well. Now, in his book, The Meaning of Marriage, Timothy Keller says, sex is perhaps the most powerful, God-created way to help you to give yourself entirely to another human being. Sex is God's appointed way for two people to say to one another, I belong completely, permanently, and exclusively to you. Keller also gives this summary. A covenant is necessary for sex. It creates a place of security for vulnerability and intimacy. But though a marriage covenant is necessary for sex, sex is also necessary for the maintenance of that covenant. It is your covenant renewal service.
Amen. And when you think about it, with 7 billion people on the planet, and there's one person that you're intimate with exclusively, that really kind of narrows it down. So it's really, really important. There's a section in here that is entitled Honor One Another, and I'm going to put a website up on the screen of a marriage resource that I recommend. And if you go to that website and check it out, it's got a lot of great material. But honoring one another is so important. What are we going to do in the bedroom? What new things are we going to try? I mean, God created pleasure for a man, for a woman to experience sexually, and what's right, what's wrong. There's no rule book. There's no scriptures in particular that talk about exactly what to do in the bedroom or what not to do in the bedroom. And so honoring one another really is the key. And we talk about it a little bit in our book, but again, there's other resources that really will help you in that area. And also there's a section in our book where we quote from another author. I'll put that book also up on the screen. But the title, The 7 Characteristics of a Creative Lover, is the portion that's quoted here in our book. Things like being carefree, being eager, being creative. Now again, we're not going to hit every one of these every time because you might be tired, other things might be going on in your life. But basically, it's a good encouragement, a goal to strive for. So now we're going to talk about some of the differences that we have as men and women. Mm-hmm. And in other videos, I've mentioned the 80-20 proportion that I often refer to. That there's certain principles we talk about that maybe 80% of the time are true and 20% of the time are exceptions. And I think that's pretty safe. So I'm going to use it again here, that 80% of the time, men are going to be a certain way, and 20% of the time they may not be. But the first one is that women have a lesser motivation towards sex. Period. That's just how it is. Which, if she could change it, she would. So men, of course, have more testosterone type hormones, and that's linked to assertive sexual desire. We desire it. Women have more estrogen, which is tied to receptive sexual desire. And this material is from another great book, which I'll put up on the screen, that I recommend that you guys read. So that's a huge difference. Again, when it's even if it's time for an in-home date, this makes it a lot easier. It really does. As Ann mentioned, when you schedule times together, you can really function in the 1 Corinthians 13 love chapter of just making a decision to engage with your spouse, whether you feel like it or not. That's love in action. But on the front end, women have a lesser motivation towards sex.
Mm-hmm. Also, a woman needs more time to get in the mood. This is where we were talking about scheduling, but for me, scheduling removes the tension because sometimes spontaneity for a wife catches her off guard. And it's challenging. For instance, especially when our children were small, and when you have children, if you're not already married, you know that it's exhausting sometimes to be a mom, and you just want to drop into bed. So you need to have a heads up about it, because otherwise it can be a source of conflict. So that really helps to schedule. I don't want to emphasize that too much, but just to let you know that. For instance, if scheduling is not something that you want to do, it would be wise for a husband to say something to his wife, in the morning or in the afternoon or in the evening to kind of prepare her for that. But also, it does give her an opportunity to say, oh, I am so exhausted, or I have this coming up tomorrow and I need to get up early. Could we wait till tomorrow night or whatever? Just to kind of, it's part of that honoring, part of that preferring, part of that loving. But I also agree that there are times when you are tired and you just give yourself regardless of being tired, because it is very, very important for that 1 Corinthians 13 love to be active in your marriage.
For most guys, if they hear their wife say, I'm tired, I have to get up early in the morning, can we wait till tomorrow night? A guy instantly marks that, engraves that on his calendar, in his heart, and he's already anticipating the next night, because that's just how most guys operate. We look forward to it in a totally different way because of those hormones. And then thirdly, the third point is that, guys, your naked body, no matter how buff you might be from going to the gym, does not by itself turn on your wife sexually. Now, guys, again, we are visually oriented. That's how we're made. So a guy sees an attractive woman and he doesn't even do anything, but there's a dial that moves inside of him. Something happens and it's kind of automatic. The needle moves on the meter. It's like, wow. And, we tell guys all the time, and women as well, but mostly guys, that, being visually tempted is not sin. Okay, temptation is just normal. And so for guys, you see a billboard, you see a pretty waitress, a pretty woman somewhere, wherever it is. Guys are stimulated a little bit. They're visually oriented. That's not sinful to be tempted. But then it's important that we keep a guard on our eyes and on our emotions, not to let it go any further than that. And so most women do not struggle with lust of the eyes in the sexual realm like guys do. But again, the point being here is that guys, we're stimulated as we see our wives, as we see our wives undress or see their bodies. They're not visually stimulated like we are.
So true. The fourth thing is that for us women, sex begins at the heart level. It's not, as Mike said, it's not a visual thing. It begins in the heart. In other words, how I am feeling emotionally about my husband is going to affect my ability to respond to him sexually. And so it's not an intentional thing. It's just how we're wired. These two things are very closely connected. And this quote sums up how a wife feels. All my power to turn you on is how I look, as Mike said. But where you have power and I do not is how you treated me today. It's all emotional.
Wow. And I must confess that because we have scheduled times and they're the same couple of days in the week. So I say do it like church, midweek, weekend, right? So there's a midweek, there's a weekend time. And I must confess that on those scheduled in-home dates, I'm really more alert to being kind and being loving towards Anne, because if I wasn't, I would be a hypocrite to then go into the bedroom at night and expect her to give herself to me and for us to relate at the most intimate level while I treated her badly that day. So again, that might sound kind of like sketchy, like, oh, so you only treat her well on those 2 days? No. But I must confess, I am more aware that because we have a date that night in the bedroom, yes, I want to make sure that I treat her well during that day. But I'm sure I treat her well on other days as well,
yes,
not just on those 2 days.
Yes.
So men need to understand this connection. And so just to wrap it up, to close it, I want to just summarize from the last page in this chapter that the way I kind of look at sexuality is kind of through the grid of painting. It's kind of like an accent color. So again, on the front end, especially for guys, on the front end, it's like they just cannot wait to be married, to have sex, and they're both looking forward to it, and the chemistry's flowing. But once you're married, it kind of gets assimilated into the rest of life. And it's kind of like an accent color. So it's not, an accent color is not on all the walls, but it adorns the whole picture in a very beautiful way, and it brings out the rest of the colors. And so we just want to pray that for your future sexuality, if you're engaged, and if you're married watching this, your current sexual life would be blessed and invigorated, and that you would connect closer and closer to one another. So God bless you today.